Here's a refined and more immersive version of your story. For 3 years, my life seemed to follow a perfect script. I had found the woman of my dreams, Mariana, and our love felt solid, unwavering. She was everything I had ever wanted, vibrant, full of life, the perfect contrast of my more reserved nature. Together, we seemed unstoppable, the kind of couple others admired. Our love story began in university, where her laughter was like a melody I never wanted to stop hearing. She brought color to my quiet world, and I found myself falling deeper every day. The first 2 years of our relationship were blissful. We built dreams together, shared our ambitions, and even introduced our families. I spent weekends at her house, and she came to mine. It felt as though we were laying down the foundation of a future I had always hoped for. But perfection is a way of unraveling. By the 3rd year, something changed. Mariana, who had once been so open, became distant. She stopped sharing the little details of her day, began making excuses, canceling plans, and pulling away from the life we had built. At first, I tried to ignore the gnawing feeling in my chest. Maybe she was just overwhelmed with work. Maybe it was nothing. But the doubt grew, whispering fears I didn't want to acknowledge. It was my father who first voiced the concerns I had been too afraid to admit. One evening, as we sat in the living room, I decided to confide in him. "Dad, I need to talk to you." My voice was hesitant, my hands clenched together as I sought his wisdom. He had always been a man of integrity, someone I trusted beyond question. "What is it, son?" he asked, his expression calm and unreadable. "It's about Mariana," I admitted, exhaling shakily. "She's been acting differently. Distant. She always has an excuse. Work, seeing her mom, needing space. I don't want to be paranoid, but something feels off." My father was silent for a moment, studying me carefully. Then, with a sigh, he met my gaze with an unsettling seriousness. "Sebastian, sometimes we don't want to see what's right in front of us," he said, his voice low. "People aren't always what they seem." His words sent a chill through me, but I pushed it aside. He was just looking out for me, right? He didn't say outright that she was unfaithful, only that I should be more alert. And so, I tried to talk to Mariana, to bridge the growing distance between us. But every conversation was met with dismissive explanations, vague reassurances, and a wall I couldn't seem to break through. Still, I wanted to trust her. Love makes fools of us all, and I was no exception. Then, one evening at my parents' house, everything changed. We were having dinner, but my father was quieter than usual, his gaze heavy with something unspoken. When Mariana left to help my mother in the kitchen, he leaned in, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sebastian, what I told you before, I'm sure of it now," he murmured, his tone grave. "There's something wrong. I've seen things that don't add up. I didn't want to say anything until I was certain, but I know she's seeing someone else." His words slammed into me like a tidal wave. My heart pounded in my chest. "Dad, how can you be so sure?" I asked, my throat tight. "Because I saw her," he said, "a couple of weeks ago, when you were at work. She was at a restaurant with a man who was not just a friend. I saw them together. Sebastian, I saw her kiss him." The world around me blurred. I struggled to breathe, to process the betrayal unraveling before me. I wanted to deny it, to believe it was some terrible misunderstanding. But my father's words carried weight, and doubt clawed at my insides. The next day, I made a choice. I had to see the truth with my own eyes. I followed Mariana after work, my pulse hammering as she slipped away with an anxious glance over her shoulder. My heart ached as I watched her step into a small cafe, where a man was already waiting for her. My hands clenched into fists as I prepared to confront them, until I saw his face. It was him, my father. The air was sucked from my lungs, and the world tilted on its axis. My mind screamed in protest, refusing to accept the horrifying truth. The man who had warned me, the father I had trusted beyond question, was the one betraying me. Rage and disbelief warred within me, leaving me frozen, breathless, shattered. How could he? How could she? The betrayal was not just from the woman I loved, but from the man I had looked up to my entire life. I had thought Mariana was slipping away. I had thought my father was protecting me. But all along, He had been the one stealing her from me. I had always trusted the man who had been my guide, my pillar of wisdom, the one who shaped my beliefs and gave me counsel in my moments of doubt. He was the person I looked up to the most, the one whose words carried the weight of unwavering truth. And yet, he was the very same man who had betrayed me in the most unimaginable way. The realization struck me like a slow-acting poison, spreading through my veins, numbing me, paralyzing me. My body felt rigid, my breath shallow and uneven. Shock gripped me first, an ice of stillness that made it impossible to think, impossible to react. But beneath that frozen surface, something else burned, a fire, a fury that threatened to consume me whole. My mind became a battlefield of thoughts colliding, each one more devastating than the last. How was I supposed to face this? How could I reconcile the image of the man I had admired with the truth of his betrayal? I couldn't stand there any longer. I needed answers. I needed the truth, raw and unfiltered. I slipped away unnoticed, my steps unsteady as I sought a quiet place to think, to calm the storm raging within me before it consumed me entirely. Hours passed, the weight of the truth pressing down on me, suffocating me. And then, as night fell, I knew what I had to do. I went straight to my parents' house. The closer I got, the louder my heartbeat became, a relentless drum pounding in my chest. Memories of every conversation I'd had with my father surfaced. Times I had trusted him, confided in him, unaware that he was the very source of my suffering. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. I didn't know what I would say, didn't know how I would confront him. But I knew one thing. Tonight, I would no longer remain in the dark. When I stepped inside, I found him sitting in the living room, as he always did, his expression calm, too calm. His eyes met mine, and in them I saw a flicker of something. Caution, worry. He knew. He could feel it in the air. The moment had come. I stood in the doorway for what felt like an eternity, my chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. And then the words escaped me, unfiltered, unrestrained. "Dad!" My voice wavered, barely more than a whisper. "I know." His brow furrowed, surprise flashing across his face. He remained silent, waiting, but he didn't deny it. He didn't even ask what I knew, because he already knew. "I know what you've been doing. I know what you did to Mom," I said, my voice rising, emotion thick in my throat. He stiffened, his jaw tightening, but still he said nothing. That silence told me everything. Mariana. Her name was like venom on my tongue, and I could no longer contain the rage boiling inside me. I followed her today. I saw her. Dad, I saw her go into that cafe. With you? I saw her kiss you. My voice broke, fury and devastation crashing over me in waves. And you told me to distrust her. You made me believe she was the one deceiving me. How could you? My father stood slowly, the tension in his posture mirroring the weight of the moment. His face contorted, pain evident in every crease, in every line. But beneath the guilt, I saw something else, something that sent a fresh wave of nausea rolling through me. Resignation. He had no defense. He had no justifications. "Sebastian, son," his voice was raw, broken. "I don't know how to tell you this. I don't even know where to begin." He ran a trembling hand over his face, as if searching for words that might soften the blow. "Everything I told you, everything you believed, was never as simple as it seemed. I failed you, and I failed you in the worst way." I shook my head, my breath coming in sharp gasps. "Complicated." I spat the word like a curse. "This is all a lie. You lied to me. Dad, you told me to trust you, to follow your advice, and all the while, you were the problem. You were with her. You destroyed everything." His eyes closed briefly, as though the weight of his own sins was too much to bear. When he spoke again, his voice was barely above a whisper. "I know. I have no excuses." His shoulders sagged. When it started with Mariana, I never thought about the consequences. I was lost. She made me feel something I hadn't felt in a long time. And then I couldn't stop. I never meant for it to go this far, but by the time I realized what I'd done, it was too late. My mind reeled, unable to comprehend the depth of his betrayal. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to disappear. The humiliation, The disbelief, the sheer agony of it all was suffocating. "That doesn't matter," I shouted, my vision blurring with unshed tears. "The damage is already done. Dad, nothing you say can change what you did." He looked at me then, regret etched into his features. But in my heart, there was only emptiness. He was no longer the man I had once admired, the father who had been my guiding light. He was a stranger, a traitor. The silence between us was suffocating. I couldn't stand to be there any longer, couldn't stand to breathe the same air as him. "I know I've hurt you," he said, voice shaking, "but I'm willing to do whatever it takes to." "No, Dad." My voice was cold, final. "I don't want to hear it. You failed me, and I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive you." Without another word, I turned and walked away, leaving behind the ruins of everything I had once believed in. But this wasn't over. Not yet. I needed answers, and I needed them from Mariana. The weight of betrayal still sat heavy in my chest as I made my way to her apartment. When I arrived, she was just stepping out the door, her face lit with a carefree smile. But the moment she saw me, she froze. A flicker of unease crossed her expression before she forced that smile back into place. "Love, what are you doing here?" she asked, her voice tight, her eyes betraying her anxiety. She knew her lies were about to unravel. I took a step forward, my voice steady but sharp. "I need you to explain something to me." Her lips parted, a weak protest forming, but I didn't let her speak. "I saw you with my father, Mariana." My voice was steel. "I saw you kissing him. How long have you been lying to me?" Her face went pale, and for a moment she was speechless. Then she took a hesitant step toward me, desperation in her eyes. "Sebastian, please, it's not what you think." "Don't." I cut her off, my voice trembling with restrained fury. "Don't feed me more lies. You betrayed me. You betrayed my family." Tears welled in her eyes, but I felt nothing. No sympathy, no forgiveness, nothing but the hollow ache of betrayal. She had broken me, and I would never be the same again. I've rewritten your story with more vivid descriptions and emotional depth, making it more engaging and intense. Let me know if you'd like any further refinements. Here's a more refined and emotionally gripping version of your story, with richer descriptions and deeper emotional complexity. The fury inside erupted like a storm I could no longer contain. My voice, sharp and trembling, sliced through the thick air between us. "You cannot call it a mistake when you were seeing him in secret for months. Was everything we had a lie? Was I nothing more than a distraction to you?" Mariana stood motionless, tears streaking down her face, but my own pain eclipsed hers. I had loved her with every fiber of my being. I had trusted her, confided in her, and yet she had shattered everything we had built without a second thought. "I know you're angry, but please, Sebastian, try to understand." "No." I cut her off, my voice raw. "I don't want to understand. I want to know how you could do this to me. How could you deceive me, knowing how much I loved you? Did I ever mean anything to you? Or was I just a pawn in your twisted game?" The silence between us was suffocating, the weight of betrayal pressing down on me. I had begged for honesty once, but now I realized that truth, when revealed too late, could be even crueler than lies. "Sebastian, I love you," she whispered, her voice barely audible, but those words meant nothing now. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. "No, Mariana, if you had loved me, you wouldn't have done this. You wouldn't have shared yourself with him while lying to my face every day. You don't love me. Not anymore." Stepping back, I let the pain wash over me, let it carve into me, because anything was better than pretending this wasn't happening. I had to leave. I couldn't stand in front of her any longer, couldn't keep looking at the woman who had destroyed everything I believed in. As I turned away, I felt her gaze burning into my back, but I didn't stop. I didn't need to hear another excuse. Nothing could change what had happened. She had made her choices. And now, so had I. Mariana reached out as if to stop me, but I kept walking. Some wounds cut too deep to heal, and this was one of them. I never saw her again after that night. The betrayal lingered in my chest like a festering wound, but I knew it was better this way. The final words I had spoken to her echoed in my mind. You are no longer a part of my life. I had meant them. No matter how much pain burned inside me, I refused to let her remain in my world. My father was no different. After what had happened, any semblance of a relationship between us shattered. There were no more conversations, no more forced attempts at reconciliation. The man I had once admired had revealed himself as a stranger, and strangers did not belong in my life. My mother, the only one left standing beside me, bore her own wounds. I saw it in the way her eyes lost their light, in the way she sat in silence, lost in thought she never voiced. She tried to hold herself together, but I knew she was just as broken as I was. But sadness is a fleeting thing when replaced by fury. One day, she no longer wept. Instead, she moved with the quiet resolve of someone who had made a decision. She filed for divorce, cutting the last tie that bound her to him. What had once been our home became nothing more than an empty house, a hollow space filled with echoes of a past we could no longer claim. There were no family dinners, no lazy Sunday afternoons spent together. Everything that had once defined our lives dissolved into memories we no longer spoke of. My mother and I shared the same grief, though we carried it in different ways. Hers was quiet and resigned, while mine burned, sharp and unrelenting. And yet, the most painful realization was not the loss itself, but what followed. My father and Mariana did not fade into regret or shame. Instead, they continued to see each other, as if the destruction they had left in their wake meant nothing. They had moved on without remorse, without guilt, but I no longer cared. Betrayal as a way of changing a person. I no longer sought explanations. I no longer longed for closure. Some wounds never close, but in time, you learn to live with them. You learn that peace is not found in revenge or understanding. It is found in letting go. And so, I chose to move forward. Not because it was easy, not because the pain had disappeared, but because I refused to let the past define me. I had lost my trust, my love, my family, but I would never again allow anyone the power to betray me.